Hey everyone, Margarita here. I want to talk in this video today about what I had mentioned in some of the last few videos I had filmed, and it's pertaining to witchcraft, mind control, spell work, brainwashing, neurolinguistic programming, kind of a mix of all of those. And they are intertwined in some sense. And I was forced to read deeper into these um, different tactics because of me being left so close to death for such a long period of time that by the time between the second and third year of being stuck that way, even after I had been under treatment for 1 to 2 years, daily treatment, removing what caused the initial injury, the initial medical emergency, and it was taking so long to barely scratch the surface, to barely get through each week. To By the time I had crossed that first threshold, it was almost 3 years into the injury, and it stayed extreme that entire time. So it was that situation that caused me to dig way deeper into all of those matters. Um, and some of what I knew about some of those subjects, I had known from the time I was a small child. It was stuff that was passed down from generations of family members, and stuff that it's been known for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that many different religions or nationalities are aware of. So some of that information was passed down to me through numerous different family members, because I do have quite a large family on my mom's side. There are hundreds of cousins. So there's different degrees of, even though I have no contact with most of these people, there are different levels and degrees of how well some of these people know me. There is a very small percentage of them that I do talk to, that I have had contact with for the past, like, I don't know, I'd say 15 years or so, maybe even a little longer than that. Initially, when I moved out of my parents' house at 18, I had no contact with any of them for several years, all the way until I had gotten moved into my second house about 5 years later. That's when I did have some contact with some of them going forward to where we are today. So through those family members and friends of those cousins and whatnot, and a little bit of this came from my mother and her sister. I had some knowledge on some of these subjects, mostly mal ojo, evil eye, um, or how to remove it, and curses, and just a little bit. They didn't give me enough information to protect myself or learn any which direction in the manner in which I needed to. And there's reasons for that, because I do believe that they're involved in this stuff. So I did know a little bit, enough to know that clearly they know about this stuff, because they had taught me just the few basic things regarding those situations as a very small child. So further down the line, upon having some contact with a very small percentage of my cousins and friends of those cousins, I was then able to gather some more information down the line. Now, some of those cousins are not, they're not all that close with my mother either, because again, there's hundreds of them. So there's different levels of how close some of these cousins are directly with her or directly with me. Most of the family members I do not have a relationship with whatsoever and have not. So I guess that's where my information was stemming from initially, what information I did have going into digging into this stuff. Because by the time I started digging, it was probably 2019 to 2020. So at that point, I was realizing I was a lot sicker than I initially thought. Part of the reason is because my mother did play a role in making sure my son and I did not receive treatment at the hospital. And I do believe it's much more than that now that I know what I know today. And it was just taking so long to cross that first threshold, not knowing if we're ever even going to make it across that first threshold. I knew we didn't stand a chance at life, and we didn't stand a chance at any quality of life. And the longer this went on, the closer my son got to kindergarten, and we still had not crossed the first threshold, I knew he wasn't teachable. I knew he couldn't go to a regular school. I knew he couldn't have the elements of the outside world and small amounts of exposures of carbon monoxide. And I knew I wasn't in a position to teach him. So the closer it got as time went on, and the closer we came to that, that point where he was going to be starting school, I became more and more panicked and more in a dire need of getting to the bottom of why we're still not crossing the first threshold, why this situation is still so extreme. And at that point, I had already been under treatment for probably a year at the time I started digging into all of this. So extremely injured for 2 years, under treatment for at least a year. And I'm digging further into how can somebody stay so injured in such an extreme state of physical pain and suffering, and in such an extreme injury, and it never stopped. So that was clue number one, that there was more going on. This is really what prompted the digging. So upon Googling some things, I'm not even sure what exactly I Googled, because what do you really Google when you're trying to figure something like that out? And then looking back over the course of my entire life, there had been all these repeated financial wipeouts, all of these excessive problems, which, yes, my mother was at the root of. I was aware of her delusional phone call placing and agency harassment against me. I knew that that was going on. But the amount of wipeouts and setbacks and restarts that kept happening, that is also not normal. So I wasn't just Googling our injury and how extreme it was in that moment and what had been going on. I was looking at the bigger picture of my entire life and how serious all of these situations had been. And why would somebody be repeatedly suffering so many wipeouts to that extreme degree, and all these serious problems that other people don't have? So it was all of that mixed with how extreme the injury was, that I was more so trying to find the words to Google to see what I could come up with that would maybe be a possibility on why this situation's so extreme. And then I started kind of scratching the surface. I started finding other people who had either been raised with similar beliefs as me, or actually had their own belief system, because my belief system is a little different than how I was raised. And it's also due to my level of life experience. So my beliefs changed along the way as I was gaining life experience, because there's a bigger picture going on than what people realize. So, I found some people on YouTube who happen to know a little bit more about this or that, regarding some of what I was digging into. And if what they were saying and what they were talking about in their videos and what they were doing, if it matched something that I already had a little bit of knowledge on firsthand, then I was more drawn to them to listen further on what they were talking about. It did not take me long to find a couple of people who seemed to know more than me, and I seemed to be on the right track. Also, during that time frame, I had downloaded Audible, and I was reading quite a few, or listening to, because my brain was injured. So it was easier for me to listen to the books, because I could take in a lot more information versus me physically reading. It would cause so much more in and out of consciousness and time loss. So I could get more information if I listened to the book being read to me versus reading it. So I did that. And I also, a lot of the books that I was reading were about brainwashing, mind control, neuro-linguistic programming, the dark triad, different types of psychology, and stuff like that. So it was quite a few books that I had listened to. And I figured out that that played a role also in what I was dealing with in regards to my mother. And then at some point, I had also gotten a couple tarot readings some months apart, and someone had led me to some further information, a couple people actually, totally different people. And one of the people had said, After I had been describing what had been going on, I didn't give them the full story, but I gave them a section of some of what was going on. And I was kind of talking about how we couldn't get out of this extreme part of this injury. And I just don't even know if we're going to live. And why would something like that be so extreme? That really doesn't make sense. And really, we do have the worst case possible case of carbon monoxide poisoning with brain injuries, where the people got to survive and then have the quality of life that we have today, even though it's limited and modified and we don't have the greatest quality of life. We literally had zero for about 5 years, and we do have the worst case where that is the situation and where the people don't receive proper help for that long of a period of time, left in that extreme state. So that is part of it, but also, I have not released this video yet. I will talk about this in its own video, but 10 days before my brain swelled up and broke all the way through, so about 3 days into me knowing something's terribly wrong, I woke up with my brain pressed against my skull, and I was in a continuous extreme state of pain and suffering with my brain pressed against my skull, not knowing what was causing it. So, and then 10 days before I died and came back, so the first time. So it was it had to be the 13th. So it was January 13th, 2018, when this incident happened. And I had a Black Eyed Kids experience. At the time that this happened, I had no idea who they were. I'd never heard of them. But finding out later down the line, my oldest son seemed to have known who they were all along. He used to read all types of crazy books, and he had all the information and knowledge, and I did not figure this out for about another year and a half from that day. Or maybe even 2 years, 1.5 to 2 years from that day. So I didn't know who they were. I will talk about this in their own video. I guess technically they're like a mix between demons and aliens or something along those lines. I do believe they are demons, regardless if they're mixed with anything or not, because who really knows the truth behind all this? You'd have to find other people with similar stories, and there isn't all that many out there. So I do believe they are demons, knowing what I know now. But I had no clue that demons could physically turn into actual like beings, like human beings almost. Like they looked human. They weren't like ghosts or anything. They were like solid human beings, except for they had all black eyes. There was no whites. There was no color. And they smelled like decay, like an earthly decay mixed with leaving your clothes in the washer for several days without putting them in the dryer. So it was kind of a smell like that. One of them also had a fly flying around their head, and it was like below zero outside. It was not a time where flies would have been out and about. They also had no coats on for how cold it was, and they also had fresh mud at the bottom of their pants. So I will get all into that in its own video, but I had an encounter with these two black-eyed kids. They seemed to be teenagers, had no knowledge of who they were or what they were. And after that, I did die and come back about 10 days later. When I figured out who they were, or when I started digging more into that, I realized I found other people with some stories of these encounters. There was not that many out there when I was initially digging for this information. But their encounters were very similar to what I had experienced. So I'm like, okay, that has to be what that was. And there was other people who were around me when this all happened. And they were in extreme disbelief at my reaction to what was going on. So I'll talk about all that in its own video as well. Because the way I reacted was so far from normal. It's not even funny. But part of it's because I didn't know who they were. But I then verified, I was able to verify a couple weeks later, because some of those people that seen the encounter with me, had the encounter with me, were asking me some strange questions. And the way I had went about taking care of the situation, they were just mind boggled by how I reacted. And they were scared to ask me anything about it. So I'll talk about that in its own video. But when I had one of these tarot readings, as I'm trying to do all this digging, as I'm piecing all this together, I tell them about the situation. And one of them had said, because I was also stating how we couldn't come out of the extreme part of the injury and it had been a couple years in, one of them had said that my mother is into some type of witchcraft of some sort, and that she sent them to me. And at the time that I was told this, I was not all that knowledgeable of what exactly my mother was into. I wasn't saying that that's not true. And again, we don't have relationship or contact or anything like that. So I wasn't saying like, no, that's not true or that it's not believable. I just kind of noted it and stuck it in the back of my mind because this was all new to me. Digging into this stuff to that degree was all fairly new to me. So I kept that in the back of my mind that she had sent them to me, which that actually makes sense. And then as I'm piecing all this together and I'm realizing what all happened during labor and delivery, how it all went down when my mother figured out I was pregnant with my youngest. I had something called amniotic bands, and it's like 1 in 14,000 pregnancies. And I had quite a few ultrasounds during my pregnancy due to that. There were some crazy ultrasounds of some pictures that I had, and I was so freaked out by these pictures that I gave them to my son's grandma because I didn't want them in my house. I didn't necessarily want to throw them away because I figured there was more to this. I just didn't know what it was at that time. I got rid of the pictures. I got them out of my own house. And I just told her, because we have so many ultrasound pictures, you can have all of these. So I gave her more than just the ones that were weird. I gave her a whole bunch. We had quite a few. But I slipped these crazy looking ones in with the ones I gave her just to get them out of my home. So they do still exist. I just don't personally have them. But now I know more about why that was the case and what all happened, like the day that she figured out I was pregnant, her reaction to things, what happened to me from that day, pretty much going forward all the way to where we are today. And then what happened during labor and delivery, how we came near death, how I then, shortly after that, started working at the place that caused our injuries when I should have never been there in the first place. All of these things play a role. It's all kind of tied in. And I started piecing it together and then realizing how sick we were, how long we were stuck that way, still thinking like, I'm not sure we're ever even going to come out of this. We're running out of time. We're literally working against the clock because he's not teachable and he still can't be sent to school. And I'm not in a place I can't teach him. It's not possible. We're that close to death. My brain is sagging in a continuous state of swelling. I'm living with extreme nausea, extreme, like brain burning and knots of carbon monoxide in my brain, like continuous diarrhea for like, hours on end every day, pretty much spending half of every day stuck to the toilet. The baby's in the same boat as me at this time frame. And I'm realizing literally he's not going to be able to go to school. We don't have proper help within the medical system. We're in an impossible situation. We have to cross the first threshold or we need to be deceased. It's one or the other. There is no in between. And it was getting to the point where it was just too much to even be holding on to life anymore. We had fought and fought and fought and held on for so long in that extreme state that I really wasn't going to be holding on much longer. And he was in that state with me. So here I am trying to get to the bottom of all of this. Why is this still going on to this extreme degree? And it was more than that. It was like 40, 50 other symptoms as well. At the same time, all that was going on. It was not possible to do anything at all, or go anywhere or do anything. Just lay there and suffer, and that's all we could do. And go to treatment and back every day and lay here and suffer and go to treatment, and then we'd be stuck to the toilet all day. And then we'd repeat this every day for years. So if I wanted to come out of this, this was part of what I had to dig into. And all of this led to that time period where I'm finding these couple people on YouTube who seem to have some information. I've then already now talked to a family friend who had some further information. I had been experiencing all these strange things, basically very heavily from the time I was pregnant, or from the time my mother found out I was pregnant, to the current day. And then even longer than that, here I'd had all these crazy events happen throughout the course of my life, all this destruction, all this chaos. My mother's at the root of all of it. That was not questionable. I knew that. It's just nobody else was aware of that. So I was aware of that. And then I'm starting to piece together, I was already aware that she was involved in some type of brainwashing tactics, mind control, um, certain sounds that while she repeats delusions around others, she's able to brainwash and control. So I was already aware of that, which then kind of goes hand in hand with the witchcraft and the manipulation. So this is all kind of coming together at one time where I have gathered all this information. And there was a couple significant periods of time where I watched her brainwash and re-brainwash several individuals around me during the time of my extreme injury, during that extreme portion of it. She had done it to my dad numerous times. She did it to my daughter long term from the time she was born. And then with my older son, not as much as my daughter, but still him as well. And many other people. I watched. There was a significant date. It was May. It was in May of 2021. I do know that. I don't know the exact date, but there was something that happened, and she cut her own TV cable, the cable line coming into their house with scissors, and she was trying to get my dad to fix it. My dad couldn't figure out what was wrong. That's where he called me. He wanted my ex to go over there and fix it. Since he works for AT&T, he should know how to fix it. And I just remember having this strange feeling about all of this. And I didn't want him to go over there, even though we were no longer together. He was already moved out of my house. And I just knew how she operated, and I had already gotten all this information, had been drawing all these conclusions. I'm pretty close to like piecing everything together very heavily. I knew it was not a good idea to send him over there because I was aware of her tactics, her brainwashing tactics, her manipulation, all these different things. And it was later found out he was over there for some hours. And ever since that day, something significantly changed, about his behavior toward me, about how he perceived our injuries, our situation from that day, and it is still going on in the current day. It has never turned back from where it was prior, since that happened. So the goal was to get him over there so he would then be in my life causing problems, even though he was no longer a part of my life. We still had a minor child, or well, two minor children at that time. She knew that that's how she was going to manipulate. So I didn't fully understand it. I just had a really bad feeling about that day. And I think I even asked his, somebody he works with to do it for him. I asked the friend first because I had such a terrible feeling about it. And I offered him, like, I offered to pay him. And I just said, can you just go over there and do this and this? And I didn't even tell him why or what I thought or any of the details. For some reason, he was busy. He couldn't do it. And that's when my ex then went over there to help my dad. But it took them some hours. He was there for some hours. That's extremely abnormal for what was going on. And the reason they couldn't find it is because I do believe she walked out into the backyard, found the cable, and cut it with scissors, is what I believe happened. Because the two of them individually, separately from each other, my dad and my ex both said that this cable line was cut with scissors. It looked like somebody cut it with scissors. Well, that was her. She did that to get him over there. So I'm not exactly sure what she's doing and how she's doing it, but just with the memories I have growing up and what I've seen happen, it is some type of neuro-linguistic programming mixed with some type of sounds that she's using, mixed with repeating delusions, and I do believe witchcraft as well. So all of this as a mix, she's using all of them together to get the results that she's getting. Um, Ever since that day, that was the serious problem. It should have not taken, I think it was 5 hours it took them to figure this out, what actually happened. And And I do believe she did that to get him over there, to program him with whatever she was saying and repeating these delusions, because these delusions in the current day still come out of his mouth. And I do have proof of these delusions also coming out of his mouth in court, when it came to my daughter being truant, and she remained truant and she stayed truant, and she's still not graduated from high school. So that those delusions were coming out of his mouth to the lady who was supposed to be investigating the situation at that time, and that lady spit out all the delusions. On top of the fact that my mother was calling this lady in the background, feeding her all this false information, getting this lady to operate on it. She wrote a whole false, I will order the file. She wrote an entire false set of papers. It wasn't just like one or two papers, it was many. And I will get there. So that's going to be its own video. It was pretty extensive. It's going to take me an entire video, probably two, maybe even 2 videos to tell the whole story. Either way you look at it, that information all came from that day in May of 2021, when all those delusions were programmed into him, and they're still programmed to this day. Now, that was only a week or two before I was falsely arrested out of my house. It was due to my ex's actions. He was no longer living here. He came here, started a whole ruckus. He even told the police this is his house. He lives here. All these crazy things. Oh, she's just crazy. She just screams for no reason. So he's not in reality about anything that was happening during the entire injury, nor was he in reality at that point, no matter how you looked at it. But that was where things had changed heavily. It was just before that incident had happened, where he got, I believe, programmed and brainwashed with these delusions. And that's why the delusions were coming out of his mouth to the police. That's also why he was attempting to choke me and kill me, and why my head was cracked off the garage floor. Because I do believe that he was trying to kill me in that moment, because I saw the look in his eyes, and what all happened during that whole incident had never happened to that degree. But then I reached a point where I could see like evil in people. Once I was injured for so long, probably less than a year into my injury, I began being able to see a lot of evil within people. So I'll get to that further down the line in its own playlist on some episodes on that. But like I said, something had significantly changed shortly before that incident. I could see it in his eyes. His behavior totally changed. Him telling the cops this is his house, he lives here, that makes no sense. His work truck has to be where he actually lives, which is where it was, where he actually lived. That can all be verified. That doesn't make sense why he would be telling the police this. I have not FOIA requested those body cam footages yet. Or I did, but they wanted almost $500. So I'm going to break it down in stages to gather some of this information to see what I can see regarding that situation once I see the body cam footages, because I did not see him talking to them. I was outside, he was inside. So I did not physically see. I'm going by what was said, what I know from other people, and then it came from numerous angles. So I'll get more into that as I keep digging, as I keep ordering files. There was a significant incident, though, that's where his behavior changed, and I do believe it was my mother's doing. And then the fact that my dad separately had said that they had found the cable cut, which looked like scissors cut it, not like it was from the weather, not like an animal had done it. So that was another big red flag. And the way I had the terrible feeling leading up to that, and not wanting him to go over there, knowing that my mother has been up to some stuff that was very malicious and downright sinister. And even though I didn't fully get it, I knew enough to know that he shouldn't be going over there. He didn't want to comprehend the degree of how serious these matters are at that time, or anywhere from that time to where we are in the current. He doesn't want to accept reality on how serious all these different matters are. And he's in an extremely delusionary state, still in the current day, in an extremely delusionary state, still repeating delusions. And I do know he's been repeating them to his family as well. None of that's reality. So if you're his family, you're watching this, none of that stuff's reality. I promise you, half of what's coming out of his mouth are delusions that were repeated to him during the incident I'm talking about in May of 2021, where my mother managed to program him. Secondary, there's other proof because she did not have full access to my two older kids 100% of the time in the manner in which, like how I didn't have anywhere to turn, I didn't have a support system. I never got away from the situation. I was forced to live suffering in the situation in an extreme manner and work very hard and get myself to safety once I turned 18. Um, it was not that way with my kids. My kids were truly raised by me, and they have numerous people, or they did have numerous people to turn to for help, whereas I never had that. So their behavior, their emotional like level of maturity is at a higher degree versus like kind of where mine was around age 17 or 18 or at the time they were those ages, um, because they were truly raised by me. They were not stuck in that predicament. But remember, I had hired Charmaine to begin documenting these crimes, this odd behavior. I was already digging into all of this when I brought her in at the beginning of 2020. I had already had enough information gathered to know this is very serious, and I had actually talked about this with her pretty close to the beginning of me bringing her in. And then I told her, like, I couldn't put it into words because my brain was still so injured. I was still very fragile. It was still hard to talk and explain things. But I told her, all I could say was, you'll see, you'll see. And she saw it. Did not take very long. She started to see. So then she was catching on to what I was saying right away. But with how my dad got spoken to at the treatment center regarding my injuries, my mother was able to re-brainwash him back the other way. Same with my daughter. She was spoken to separately, still re-brainwashed back the other way. Numerous times during all of this, my daughter did go see Charmaine as well. And we were able to prove that there is some type of brainwashing and mind control going on because of how my daughter was screaming at me, delivering the information out of her mouth, reaching for things to scream and repeat. And you can tell these are all things that came from my mother's programming. This happened many different times over the course of the time Charmaine has been involved. So it, like, they may be programmed with a trigger word or more than one trigger word is what I am thinking is part of this. But the fact that we were able to prove how that all went due to my daughter's behavior, because she did not have 100% access to my older kids and zero access to my youngest. Because she didn't have full control over them, they were spending long periods of time away from my parents' house where they're not anywhere near them for some time. And then for a couple of years at this point, I had already told my dad, they're not allowed at your house. You cannot take them back to your house. You can come here, but you cannot leave with them. You cannot take them to your house. That had been a known thing. As I was piecing all this together, I was very firm on what I was seeing. I already knew from, the escapade years ago that she went on. So that was already a kind of a thing that had happened way before my injury. And then, once the injury and it was becoming more extreme and what she was repeating to all the people around me, she would get them to all be, I wouldn't be anywhere near them. She would get them all in her presence only and repeat these delusions and program the people around me with these delusions, and they would operate on them. So there is more than enough proof because Charmaine directly watched all of this happen with my daughter. And it happened so many times that you could tell that she had been programmed based on what was coming out of her mouth and the manner in which it was coming out of her mouth. You could tell that it is some type of brainwashing. And it happened, I'd say, in like a 2-year time span, a 2 to 3 year time span where Charmaine saw all of this, all these different times. It happened at least 15 to 20 different times. So the proof is there. And I do believe part of the reason that the behavior with my older two kids can shift in and out of the delusion screaming at me, and how this goes, because it has happened to my older son as well. And so Charmaine has documented every single time this has happened with my older two kids. It does not happen with my youngest because there's no relationship, no contact. So there is proof of each time this has happened, she has documented it. But it is because she doesn't have full access, and she is able to control how they think or get them to scream the delusions. I don't know if it's a trigger word. I'm not exactly sure what triggers it, what sets it off. But I do believe it's some type of brainwashing, neurolinguistic programming, mind control, and witchcraft. all of those or a mix of those. Or she's shifting which one she's using based on whatever's going on. But I had Charmaine involved long enough to where, because there was a very extreme, like 1 year period where everybody in my house was screaming so much. And it was because my mother was in the background controlling all of their behavior, knowing I was so close to death, knowing I wasn't going to make it out of this. I knew I wasn't going to make it out of this if something didn't happen. And she was trying her best to make sure I did not make it out of this. At the root is because she would gain access to the rest of that trust fund she was trying to get her filthy little paws on. So because of how extreme it got that last year with everybody still being in my household and it exploding and ending in shambles, it was my mother's behavior that caused all of that to happen every step of the way, and it to grow to that extreme degree during that extreme part of my injury, and it to explode to that extreme degree. And it was everybody. It was my ex, it was my dad, it was my older two kids, and she was controlling all of their behavior. And again, we have Charmaine involved to verify all of this. That is one of the main reasons I brought her in as well. So it was several main reasons. It was I was piecing this together. I was seeing that's what was going on. It was because I was near death and the people around me were acting like that's not what was going on. Not knowing if I was going to live, knowing that somebody needed to sit them all down and explain to them. And if they did not, that I knew I wasn't going to make it. And it's not possible to continue on living with them not understanding this is my home, this is my household, I'm the one running and providing and building everything, and it's my money and my life that pays for everything. This injury has to be situated and taken care of, and these people have to be put in their place, the people around me, in order for that to ever happen, because I can't live in that extreme state of pain and suffering any longer than where I was at. So it was that extreme. It was her controlling all of their behavior during all this. Once she realized that I knew more than she initially thought, that's where it started to heighten. So it became more excessive, it became more heightened. And it was about a year period where she became aware, because I had then told my dad some of the memories I had remembered. As my memories were coming back all during this time, I had all these missing memories that I wasn't even aware I was missing. As they were coming back, I told him what some of these missing memories were. And then I told him, he was at my house, I told him, you cannot go back and say anything to her. What did he do? He went back and told her. So right then and there, from that day forward, that's where she went 100 times heavier with what she was doing to all the people around me. And she went even heavier at it with all of them, causing the extreme fights within my household, causing me to be falsely arrested, causing my near death all these times. She took it, once he delivered that information back to her from that day, she knew she had to work harder to cover everything up. And she like went 100 times heavier with every individual from that day forward on all of this. So there was another clue right there. And nobody was in reality ever again from that point forward. The other clue to some of this is with me, I lost all those memories, and I didn't know I was ever missing any memories. All these memories start coming back after my brain broke. Literally, my brain broke. It exploded internally and broke, and I was dead for 4 hours, unconscious in my bed. And so when all that happened and I came back, so when that all happened, it's really hard to explain because I'm sure there's not somebody else out there in my shoes regarding this, but most people are brainwashed or programmed to some degree, whether they realize it or not. I'd say 99 to 100% of the population has some degree of brainwashing. And they use the TV to do it as one of the main sources, in many other ways. That's just one of the main sources. I also don't watch TV. I never really did all these decades because I was busy working and building success all these decades. So I was never really watching TV prior to my injury. But that is how most people get programmed or brainwashed to believe this or that. Much of society is not living in the reality of how things actually work. I do know that. There are quite a few people who do know what I know. So it's not like, I don't know what the percentage is, maybe 10% of the population can maybe see what I see or understand the level of things that I know things at. But I do know most people can't comprehend anything I'm saying. So when my brain broke, um, it broke any type of programming. Let's just say I did watch TV more regularly, or I was brainwashed with this or that along the way. When my brain broke, it reset all of that. None of that existed anymore. If it even existed in the first place, I don't believe that stuff maybe didn't exist in my world, but it was different because my mother was into the brainwashing, the programming, the mind control, the witchcraft, whatever it was. When that incident happened, when my brain exploded internally and broke, it was like hitting the reset button, and I no longer had I had zero programming on me whatsoever at that point going forward. None of it existed. I was already in a boat where there wasn't much there regarding any type of brainwashing or programming. I was already in a different boat. But what it was is my mother's manipulation and brainwashing. That must have been under some type of control of me for numerous reasons. So after the first brain injury, when my son was born, that's where the memory started coming back. Once my brain exploded, it was like hitting the reset button altogether. No programming was left whatsoever. So whatever she had programmed or brainwashed me with initially growing up all those years, whatever it was no longer there. I know during the course of me growing up, from the time I was left the trust fund all the way going forward, she had created so much confusion and chaos just with between her household. So like just her, my dad, and me, when I didn't have kids yet. And my kids never lived there. I moved into my own home while I was in labor with my oldest. So it was just the three of us. She created so much confusion and chaos, and she did that intentionally. So neither one of us would remember that this trust fund was ever left for me. That's a part of that. So she had a large agenda behind all of this. I just don't know how many people are helping her. And I know she's not doing it by herself, because I think I talked about spiritual rank in a different video already, or at least I mentioned it. My spiritual ranking is higher than hers by a long shot, and um, she's not more powerful than me. So she would need help to be able to control me to cause the things that have happened in my world, and as long term as they've all been going on. She would need 1 to 2 people or more to be helping her with this. This would not be something she could pull off on her own. So she had created all that chaos, all that time. I don't believe that my dad ever even realized that the trust was left for me. I think she had lied. If my memories are correct, I do believe she lied to him about what was left for me. She minimized it. And then she created all the chaos and confusion to where he would never remember any of it. And now that he's injured and he's in a facility and what's all happened, I'm sure he's never going to remember any of this. Even if he were to be asked about it today, I don't believe that's something he would remember. So there's numerous stages of what has happened, but with my brain breaking and the reset button getting hit, um, literally almost every memory that I didn't know that I was missing all came back at some point. The majority of these memories came back the first 3 years of the injury, like less than 4. So I'd say like the first 3.5 years, most of these memories were back. Only in the past year, a small percentage of them have also returned, some things that I did not remember. But for that many memories to be missing, and it's actually a certain time frame as well. So that's what else also tells me this has to do with some type of brainwashing, mind control, programming. That's also a clue to it as well. Because then I was completely removed from ever being around her going forward, right when I turned 18, right when I bought my first home. And that's where all the memories like were lost for a couple years, right before that and right after that. So I think that played a role because she had full control over my mind every step of the way, full control, like a what do you call those people in Hollywood? Like a handler. So she had full control for all that time. And then I cut all ties, went in my own direction, and had no contact. And I do believe that that's what caused some of these missing memories, because I went from being fully brainwashed, fully controlled to, and it wasn't really working too well, because I still was smart enough to know that I had to break free, know that I had to cut all ties, know that I had to be on my own. Even if I didn't have all the answers, I was going to figure it out. I didn't have a choice. I knew that. So I do believe that that played a role with all of that at that time frame. And right then and there, that's where everything changed, because I was my own person, off in my own world. There's no contact, there's no relationship, there's no more programming. It's all cut off immediately. So that's where the period of time where some of those memories were missing. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is, because at some point as I was searching up all this information, I was trying to figure out, just when I was into the brainwashing, the neurolinguistic programming, the dark triad, the mind control, when I was reading all of that, all those books, she doesn't have, I have more of a college education than she does. And I have for a long time have been at a higher education level than her. She only went to school for medical transcription at age 18, got a job working for Oakwood Hospital at age 18. She never went further than that, but she got a job in the medical billing department. So my level of education is higher than hers, but she's worked in the hospital system since she was 18 years old. She retired right before COVID started, so in the beginning of 2020. So if she was born in 1956 and she was 18 when she started, that would put her like 1974, and she worked in the hospital system till 2020. So I do believe something within her job, and I'm not sure exactly where all this falls, because again, she has not a very high level of education, less than 1 year of college total. So I think that they may play a role in how she got involved in something like this for numerous reasons. Excuse me. The length of time she was working in the medical system, the length of time she was at the same company all the entire time. And I have memories that came back from the time I was a small child in the pediatrician's office that I was seeing before they bought their house in Brownstown. They had a house in Lincoln Park. I had a pediatrician in Lincoln Park, and I switched pediatricians once we came out here, and I never went back to that office. But I have memories of being at that first office, and there were some very shady things going on in this office. I'm not going to talk about it in this video, and some of it I may never talk about, but I do believe that there was something related to her working in the medical system, and something to do with that, either that doctor or that doctor's office, and some type of program they had enrolled me in, some type of experimental program. There's other factors that give me clues to that as well, that I do have proof of, physical proof in my hands. I have it. So I'm not going to go into detail in this video. And again, I really just don't know if I'm going to talk about all that, but there are certain things that happened, and that tells me that that could be how all this came about. I don't know if it was that pediatrician's office mixed with the job she held, or her working for that company and then that pediatrician's office, or that doctor. I'm not exactly sure, but it's related in some way, shape, or form. I would have to find other people. I don't even know if that's possible, or if I'm ever going to figure it out or get fully to the bottom. But I will give more clues down the line and go into some of these details down the line, just not anytime soon. I'm probably not going to be able to talk about it until arrests are made. But I do believe that that plays a role in what all happened, the brainwashing, the programming, whatever she's into, because I'm thinking, how does she know how to do this stuff? Where would she learn that degree of skill? Because if she only has 1 year, less than 1 year of college, and it doesn't add up. She doesn't have a high enough level of skill in life in general or in school, for her to be messing with something to the degree that where things are and what's all been going on all these decades. So that's a huge red flag. So initially, when I started figuring all this out, that was some of the first red flags that went up. Well, what exactly is she involved in? Because this doesn't add up. She's not that educated. She doesn't hold some high position. She's never made more than 30 grand a year. Until the last couple of years she was working, she made 35 grand a year. None of that makes any sense, except for placing it with the company she worked for, working in the hospital system, and that pediatrician's office is somehow tied into all of this as well. I don't know if I'm ever going to get the full picture, but that does play a role somewhere in this. So when it comes to the witchcraft portion of all this, I do believe it's something that she had been into. I don't know if she was messing with it as a kid or a teenager, but I do believe that that's how she's kept my dad under her control as well. So I do believe that part of it is the brainwashing and whatnot, regardless of how she learned all of that. Um, it had been going on from the time I was a small child, if not longer. And she has been able to control my dad all of these decades as well. Even though I've repeated truths to him over and over and over, all spaced many years apart, he still wasn't hearing anything I was saying, and there was nothing I could do about it because he was grown and he wasn't, he could like make his own decisions. There was nothing I could do to change his mind. And then the way his behavior was during my injury just really told on it, told on what she was doing even further. But I do believe she may have been dibbling and dabbling with some dark art stuff back as a teenager, possibly. It could be stuff she learned with certain cousins or her siblings. I'm not sure who exactly is involved. Or like I said, she could be going to a practitioner, or at least in the current day, probably going to a practitioner. Or it's her little friend group, her group of officials who've been helping her commit these crimes against me. It could have to do with those people. But what I do know is this has been going on longer than that group of officials have existed. So I'm not sure where it kind of ties in and meets and cross paths, because a lot of the stuff was going on prior to that little group existing. So it is a mix of these things. It has shifted along the way. There's been different stages of what's gone on. I do know that she's into all of these things. But again, we would need a criminal minds team, and it would take probably Charmaine and myself to both be present behind a two-way mirror. Or what do you call it? A one-way mirror, whatever they're called. It would take the two of us to be present behind the scenes along with a criminal minds team in a very long period of interrogation to get any factual answers to half of the stuff I'm talking about, or any confessions to come out of her, because she's so extremely disordered. She's never going to admit to anything she's ever done. She's going to continue to lie and lie and lie and lie. Even if you're presenting her the evidence, she's going to continue to lie and say, I'm this problem. I've always been this problem, even though we have proof and facts. So I don't know how many answers we're going to be able to put together, but all the things I talked about are intertwined. My mother is messing with all of these different things. And I knew enough by the time my youngest son was born to know that he was never going to be able to have a relationship with her whatsoever. I did know that. And the amount of times I've seen her control my dad's behavior, it's just so excessive there, because there's been many different times. And the way she was able to control all of the people around me to the extreme degree she did during my injury, and then the manner in which she did while I was in school when I was a minor, and she was placing all those delusional phone calls, getting all those teachers to operate against me. That very well there could have been some brainwashing in there as well. I'm not really sure if there was or if there wasn't at that time, but there's many factors and many different red flags and situations that have all happened along the way that led me to the conclusion that I have today, even though I don't have 100% of the picture. I do know that the information I do have are facts. I'm not questionable about any of what I've just said. I know that everything I mentioned in this video are facts. They are going on, or they have gone on in the past. So I don't know, regards to the witchcraft and what else she's doing. I don't know if she's personally doing it. Like, I feel like if she's not currently the one doing this, she has dibbled and dabbled in it at some point. If it's all been a practitioner for some time, She was doing it herself with either her little friend or family group or whatever prior to that, for sure. This isn't something she just woke up, being middle-aged and started messing with. This is something she's been messing with for some time. The amount of control she's had over my dad, I see the bigger picture of what happened and how she targeted him as a teenager and saw how she was going to use him to get herself ahead in life and her overall plans with all of that. I can go further into detail in this in different videos. But that all is the situation regarding their relationship over the long haul. It's just that I've always been able to see through her from the time I was very little, and that scared the shit out of her. That put the fear of God in her, and that's why she's been lying about me, staying ahead of the game and ahead of the lies in advance all these decades, because I could see through her. I could see her evil soul from day one. So that's another factor in all of this. And I do remember being at that weird doctor's office where I remember them telling her that something they were going to do to me was going to help with that. So I do remember that. And then more so recently, I've been experiencing some crazy things the past couple weeks, couple months, heavily the past couple weeks, really longer than that. But what's been going on recently is I know that there's been death magic sent my way. I know it's been being sent my way for some years. This isn't new. But I can tell when each round is kind of when it happens again, when more work is done on me, then it's sent my way again. I experience very specific things. Since I have done all this reading and figured this out about 5 or 6 years ago, I was able to kind of pinpoint more things of what's been going on. There is one specific thing that happens to me when someone does witchcraft on me, and I was able to kind of verify, because it's been numerous. It's not just her, it's other people as well, separate from her as well. There's other people completely separate from her that don't even know her that have done this. And it's something that has never happened to me before until maybe 4 years ago. Was the first time this specific, I'm not going to talk about what it is because my video kept getting cut off every time I tried to film this. But there's one specific thing that kept happening to me, and I was able to pinpoint it, and I was suspicious of who may have done it. And then I didn't see that person for some months. I crossed paths with that person. We briefly said a couple words to each other. Our hands briefly touched. And what I said is the specific thing that happened to me the next day. I then verified that I was right, that is what's going on regarding that matter. And then that situation happened to me a few days ago. So that tells it this time though, I'm pretty sure it's my mother doing it. And then there is one other specific thing that has happened that tells me there's witchcraft being done on me. Again, not really experiencing this prior to like 4 to 5 years ago. There is a couple times, one significant time ever, but there's been a handful of times where my throat completely closed up and I thought it was an extreme medical issue. I thought, I didn't know what it was exactly, but I thought for sure it was a medical issue, and I thought I was going to have to go to the hospital, and I can't even get help at the hospital, but my throat was closing off. And it's because somebody was it's probably more than one person. It was like a group of them doing witchcraft on me, and it closed up my entire throat to where I couldn't get any air in. I had found the reversal to it, half of which I already knew of from the time I was a small child. One of those people I was watching videos on all those years ago when I was piecing this together, went back, watched some of her videos at the time this was happening to me, and she had the rest of the steps to kind of go with what I already knew. And I was able to remove it just in the nick of time. It went on for 6 days. So there are some specific things that have been happening to me the past couple months or so pretty heavily. Really the past, like since I was pregnant with my youngest, even more heavily from 2018 on, and even more heavily from like 2020 on. So some of these things have all been heightening around me recently in the past couple weeks to months, and I was experiencing all these strange things in my house. I'm somebody who has to sage like once a month living in this current house that I'm in. because of the amounts of jealousy and envy. That is part of it, but it's beyond that. There's more to it than that. But there has been some strange things going on around me. And once I kind of managed to break some of it off this past week, things significantly changed. Maybe it was last week. Things significantly changed for me once it clicked what was actually going on. So, yes, that is what's going on. Everything I talked about in this video, my mother is up to. I will be digging further into more of what's all going on, and I'll be back with more. Thanks. Bye.